The important thing is the Lord Jesus. Last week we talked about what apologetics is, and I published a little article I printed it out on our copy machine. Last year we gave you a book. This year I'm just going to give you a little 4.5-page article. It's real quick reading, and they're back there on the back table. I made one for everybody. Yeah, Glenn's picked up one right there. So you take one or two, take as many as you want, and it just kind of helps keep you informed and tells you a little bit more about the topic. We talked about what faith is. What faith is according to the Scriptures. Listen, that it's not something that you can't put any trust in or something that you trust in despite the fact that you know it's not true. It's not something you work yourself into in a hypnotic trance. It's well-reasoned, thoughtful acceptance of things, principles, constructs, propositions, that even though they're not seen oftentimes in the physical world, you still nevertheless have good reason, data, and evidence to believe they're true. In other words, faith is not a blind leap in the darkness, it's a step into the light. That's what faith is. Faith is trusting someone that even though you can't see him, you can see his effect on the world. That even though you don't have an exact word from his lips necessarily, except for the written word that he gave you, even though you're not absolutely certain that you've heard him, you're absolutely certain you can trust him because you've seen the record of history and how he's interacted with his people throughout all time, throughout the recorded human history. So this week, take a copy of that before you leave. But I also mentioned last week that this week we'd start looking at some specific data and evidence, some reasons to believe in the God of the Bible. And I guess I spoke a little bit prematurely because what we're going to look at today doesn't necessarily prove the God of the Bible, but it certainly points to a God. You have to add more arguments. Most of our arguments that we're looking at, just a couple of them today, the ones we're looking at today, they wouldn't prove necessarily that the God we're talking about is the God of the Bible. But they do, I think, build a cumulative case. Cumulative means that you got to put several of them together, right? No single one of them is a slam dunk because God's kingdom works on faith. You wouldn't need any faith if there was one slam dunk argument and that was so thoroughly convincing that you dare not reject. I don't know how we get that to do that every week, but it's wonderful. Now, when I use the word argument, I'm not talking about the rancor, spiteful, mean-spirited, emotional diatribes that we often give one another in love as married couples and those kinds of things, or how you sometimes have to argue with your kids to get them to see reason. In fact, most of the arguments that we think about are based on emotional outbursts. They don't have much at all to do with reason and evidence. But a philosophical argument, the ones we're going to look at today, those are ways of getting at the truth through reason and evidence, through rational thought. So an informal argument you might think of as a heated emotional exchange, but an academic argument or a philosophical argument is something completely different. If you have a program, I've probably written the definition similar to this in it. It says an argument is any group of propositions in which one proposition, in other words, your conclusion, is claimed to logically follow from or to be derived from one or more other propositions which are your premises. And those are accepted and affirmed as supporting grounds for the truth of the conclusion. In other words, if A is true and B is true, then C naturally follows. You'd have to deny C, reject A or B or both with good reason. So logical thought is a meticulous, well-studied field of philosophy. It has specific rules and methods that help it get at the truth of subjects and concepts that are outside of the realm of science. And by the way, God is such a subject. I laugh a lot of times when I hear people say, well, science has disproved God. I don't laugh. I scratch my head. I guess it's like Arsenio used to say. It's one of those things that makes you go, right? Because it's not even in the field of science to be able to offer such proof. Don't be bullied by that statement. Science can't disprove God. And I'm not saying that because I don't like science. I hope science quickly discovers a way to rid your body and chest of this Southeast Texas phlegm this time of year. You know, I love science. But rather, the reason I say that is because I know how science works. Science operates on induction, not deduction. So what's the inductive method? That entails searching out things in the world, drawing generalized conclusions we often call hypotheses about those things based on observation. So scientists can only draw conclusions on what they find, not on what they can't find. So by its very nature, science can't prove the non-existence of anything. It just can't. It's not in the field or realm of science to do that. So since science is never capable of proving the non-existence of anything, one can never accurately claim that science has proven God doesn't exist. It's just a misuse of the discipline of science. In fact, that kind of claim, think about it, if I could say, I know for a fact God doesn't exist, then I'm omniscient, aren't I? Because I know everything, which would make me God. So I've just disproven my own statement. Well, that doesn't stop scientists from saying it, though, does it? They often speak far outside their fields of expertise and knowledge. They make all kinds of claims they can't support. They write books full of really nonsense and philosophical nonsense, and they fool a lot of people. And mostly they're fooling themselves, but the other people that they fool, usually their reasoning goes something like this, which is not reasoned at all. It's a fallacy. But they say, well, that's a smart person. They're got to be a lot smarter than I am. And if they've decided there's no God, maybe I'm foolish for thinking there is. Have you ever felt like, I know they're wrong, but by golly, it's hard to show them. I just don't know what to say to those people. But in reality, the reasoned, logical case for God is a really solid, strong case. Since God designed our lives and His kingdom, remember, to work by faith, it's not a slam dunk case, but there are at least a dozen very strong arguments. I find them very compelling, very convincing. And they work together to build that cumulative case I talked about that's hard to ignore unless you have ulterior reasons to not want to believe it, which is the real truth behind most or much of atheism. So today, let's just take a preliminary look at 2 reasons, just 2. If you have a program, they're written there. 2 reasons that faith in God makes sense. And before I give them to you, I have to tell you, don't forget, these are arguments for a God. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to give arguments that the God of the Bible must of necessity be that God. Number 1, this is weird if you've never heard of it. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument. That's a mouthful. Kalam was a Muslim scholar in the Middle Ages. And interestingly, when he initially made the argument, there was nowhere near the almost overwhelming depth of scientific support and corroboration for his second premise, the second one I'm going to show you, as that we now have. And it's very difficult to find a living, published cosmologist today, someone whose field of inquiry, their study, is the cosmos. Remember Carl Sagan said the cosmos is all there is. Do you remember his show? Well, he was wrong. But anyway, he said that's all there is. It's hard to find anybody now in the field of cosmology who doesn't agree with premise 2. But for a long time, there was another prevailing theory. What's called the Big Bang, though, at least for the last 90 years, since 1927, has been the prevailing cosmological model for the universe. And basically that says there was a quantum singularity. They don't know what it is, where it came from, or how it began. I do, by the way. You do too if you read your Bible. But they say that there was a point when there was no time, space, matter, or energy until that quantum singularity exploded. Now listen, most explosions produce chaos and mess. But this one produced all that we know of matter, space, time, and energy that we call the universe or the cosmos. And that's the Big Bang Theory. And it's one of the most well-proven, well-attested to. You can measure and study the universe and the expansion of said same in about 13 different ways, all of which agree at the same timetable, at the same place in time, in the same way, that the universe obviously at one time all existed in a single, less than the size of an atom point of potentialized energy, matter, space, and time. So let me give you the two premises and then the conclusion of the Kalam cosmological argument. Number one, this is so simple, it'll astound you. Number one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Wouldn't that be true? Do you know of a single exception throughout all of history or time? Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Naturalists, by the way, used to say that the universe didn't need a cause because it was eternal. But now, of course, remember, we have very good reasons, both scientific and philosophical, to doubt that that's the case. So if the universe isn't eternal, something outside of time, space, matter, and energy had to be the cause of the universe, and whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise number one of Kalam is virtually inescapable. It's as airtight as any statement can be. It may not seem like it's saying much, and that's the beauty of a really good, well-crafted, tight argument, by the way, is because you can't disagree with premise one and have a brain. Right? Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Number two, second premise, the universe began to exist. Now, about this time, if you're talking to your atheist friend, they see where you're going, so they like to argue with one of these two premises. But if they argue with premise two, they're arguing with 99.9% of all settled science in cosmology and cosmogony. And they don't want to do that because that's where they'd rather put their faith. Lord have mercy, we don't want to be accountable to and responsible to an all-knowing, all-seeing, omniscient, all-powerful, omnipotent, omnipotent God. So premise 2 says the universe began to exist. Whatever began to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Okay, so you know what the conclusion must be. You don't even have to say who or what it is, but would you say, logically it follows, deductively, from premise 1 and 2, therefore, the universe has a cause. Right? I know that's simple. I'm a simple guy. Now you might ask how such a conclusion proves there's a God. This is where it gets fun. This is where it gets kind of interesting. Think about what the universe is. By the way, universally acknowledged by every reputable scientist in the field, the definition of the universe is all of time and space and its content. That includes planets and stars and galaxies, the content of intergalactic space, the smallest subatomic particle, and all matter and energy. In other words, everything in and of the physical world is the universe. Now go back to that conclusion. Hopefully you wrote it down in your program, but if you didn't, here's what it is. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Remember, it's airtight and inescapable because both premises are true. And you can't fight either of the premises, so you've got to accept the conclusion. Now here's the rub. The problem that scientists cannot deal with through strict materialism or naturalism, and the reason it's outside their field of knowledge and expertise, is that the cause of the universe cannot be anything in the universe. It can't be. It cannot be material because by their own empirical observations and conclusions, all of matter, which is what's material, all space, time, and energy, all of it came into existence at the Big Bang. Dr. William Lane Craig is a name I hope you'll become familiar with. He's published extensively on just the subject of the Kalam cosmological argument. In fact, he wrote a book called The Kalam Cosmological Argument, which you can probably find in a local library. He wrote it in 1979, but if you can't, Amazon will send you a used copy. So there's a lot more that can be said about this, and there are a lot of questions you'll have which are all answered, not even succinctly, but voluminously But listen, whatever made the universe, listen, here's the rub. Whatever made the universe, since it's not matter, what is it? It's immaterial. Has to be. Because it can't be within the context of the subset of that which was created. Since all matter came into existence at the Big Bang, before the Big Bang, which is even difficult to say, you can't really say it scientifically since time didn't exist. It's hard to say something was before it, but so that our little pea brains can understand it, and mine too. Listen, there was nothing material, so whatever created it couldn't have been material. The creative force also has to be non-spatial because space itself did not exist before the formation of the universe. It must be very powerful because just the observable universe from photos and telescopes from our perspective is about 28 billion parsecs, 91 billion with a B, light years. The universe is that big. It's that big in diameter at the present time. The force, therefore, that created the universe, in addition to being immaterial, non-spatial, and unbelievably powerful, must also be intentional because the creation of the universe is the single example of an explosion producing order and complexity, not chaos and destruction. Think about it. The Big Bang produced this. And all of it perfectly in order and rotationally set. And in fact, Dr. Hugh Ross in his latest book said, everything in the entire cosmos seems to be tailor-made so that life can exist on this little speck of a planet we call home. Wow. Let me just save some time here, because the next argument is also going to give you some of these elements in it too. When you parse it out through, your reason and logic and thoughtful attention, reasoning as you do in this case from effect, which is us and everything that we know that exists, back to cause, here's what you wind up with. You wind up with a cause that is eternal because it existed before time. A cause that's personal because it chose to create. A cause that's incredibly powerful, immaterial, that's non-spatial. In other words, omniscient, eternal, omnipotent, and personal. By any correct scriptural definition, we're talking about Almighty God.
Amen.
That's who that is. Look Him up. You can just look Him up, on a dictionary. Those are the attributes of God. Now, if you want to escape that logically, since the argument's deductive, remember what you have to do. You've got to defeat one of the premises. Which one's wrong? Why is it wrong? Well, maybe you say, well, I don't know that whatever begins to exist has a cause. How do we know that? Well, the burden of proof would be on you. Right? Because we've never seen any reason throughout all of studied science and history to doubt that premise. We don't know of anything else, even in quantum mechanics, that would make us doubt it. Maybe you say, I don't believe the universe began to exist. But the problem there is that you wind up with a lot of science to explain away, and you're not likely to defeat it based on anything currently known. If all of them study it and say it did, I don't know that I can come up with make a powerful enough telescope in my living room to prove them wrong. So you wind up, really inexorably, you wind up with a universe that exists because of an intentional act of the will of an all-powerful, in other words, an omnipotent, all-knowing, in other words, omniscient God. And that's only one of a dozen or so arguments for the existence of a God. Not necessarily the God of the Bible. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, or the next couple of weeks. But someone with all of His attributes. So let me give you the other argument for today. Let me give you one more, and then I'm going to close. There's the teleological argument. Don't you know that? The teleological argument, also known as the argument from design. You could put that in your notes. The argument from design. In other words, it states a designer has got to exist. A designer must exist. Since the universe and living things exhibit marks of design in their order, in their consistency, in their unity, in their patterns. I don't know if you've ever seen a snowflake. Teleology, by the way, is the philosophical attempt to describe things in terms of their purpose, or at least their apparent purpose, their overall directive principles, their patterns, their goals. A typical analogy that was first used by William Paley back in the late 1700s is the watchmaker argument. You may have heard it restated like an airplane in a junkyard. If you go to a junkyard after an explosion and you find a 747 sitting there, you can rest assured it wasn't because all those pieces just flew into position when the explosion happened. Right? If you're walking through a desert and you see a watch and you uncover it and wipe it off and pick it up and go, wow, that's a beautiful pocket watch, I promise you, it wasn't because if nature's left to itself, it will eventually produce pocket watches. So everywhere you look, there's apparent design, and it's evident, and even non-Christian physicists, biologists, cosmologists, they acknowledge it. And they say that it only appears designed, those who are not Christians. They say, well, yeah, it appears to be designed, but that's because we've had billions of years for it to finally happen, and it all came in. It just so happens that now, at this point that we're living, now everything looks designed, but you should have seen it 10 billion years ago. The crux of the teleological argument is that such appearance of design is so widespread, so meticulous, and so precise that it's foolish to entertain the notion that it happened not only in biology, but in the cosmos by something akin to chance. The function, precision, and design with which the universe operates, according to the teleological argument, is because there's a designer. And by the way, he's a designer with a capital D. Now let me close. I'm fascinated myself, personally, with these kinds of arguments. And I find them usable in their place, you know. They're important in their place. But even more important than the arguments and more important than even in the cumulative case that they build, I personally have a basic inner witness. I have a grounding and an awareness of the presence of God. The spiritual presence of God came to live in me when I was a 10-year-old kid. And I know that happened. And I didn't know a lot of these things, and so I also have a very real enemy who pecked away at me from time to time and would say, are you sure about that? And he tried to kick slats from underneath me and tried to keep me off balance and tried to keep me from being focused, because if I get focused and on balance and aware like you, I'm dangerous to his kingdom. The most important thing I know about myself is that I know him. And I know he knows me. I realize I haven't set the groundwork to convince, if there are anybody here today who doesn't believe the Bible. And I'm going to try to get to that over the next couple of weeks. But even without that teaching, with or without what I have to say about it, the Word of God, absent me, without Jeff, the Word, in fact, more so without me, it's living and active and sharper than the two-edged sword, piercing as far as the division of soul and spirit, both joint and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and the intentions of the heart. Listen, it's powerful, it's true, it's historical, it's life-changing. And the Bible talks about you. Did you know that? You're a frequent subject of the Bible. Constantly. Over and over. For example, every time it says all, you're included. One thing it says is that for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I'm included in the word all, and so are you. And then the Bible says that all of us have sinned and fall short of the glory, and the wages or the payment for that sin is death. But that's not why we call it the good news. Okay? In fact, that's horrible news. Because if I've sinned and I've fallen short of God's best and His perfect and His plan for my life, I've fallen short of glorifying Him with my life and of the glory He wanted to crown my life with, and the payment for that sin is my own death and suffering. If that's all we knew about God and His plan for us, we'd have no reason for hope, and the gospel would be terrible news, but the gospel's good news, and here's why. Because the Bible says something else about you. It says, but God commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Now that tells me something if I'm reading carefully. And of course I know many of you, most of you, I'm sure everyone in this room has heard that Christ died for you, and you know that. And probably you've appropriated that and received his gift. But when these words were written, Paul, the earthly human instrumentality, the author, the writer, God's the author, but at least the writer, was writing to a group of people who were meeting together for a church in Rome. And think about what God was telling them. He says, listen, he commended his love that while we were yet sinners. That means when he's writing to them, present tense, they're not anymore. That there can be a day and a time in your life when you go from God seeing you as broken, defective, sinful, and a sinner to being seen as a son or daughter. Whole, sinless. Now listen, that doesn't mean, because you can read the whole book of Romans and you know these people had not achieved sinless perfection in their behavior or their attitudes. They would not achieve human perfection in this life, but they're no longer looked on by God as sinners. And you don't have to be either. In fact, the Bible says, as many as received him, he gave the power to become the sons and daughters of God to everyone who believed in his name. Jesus was talking to a religious man, somebody who had grown up trying to dot all the dot the T's, that'd be crazy. To dot all the I's and cross the T's. And he said, listen, marvel not that I tell you, you must be born again. Can I tell you, if Nicodemus, that's the man he was talking to in the 3rd chapter of John, if Nicodemus had to be born again, as good and faithful as he was, then you and I need to be born again. That doesn't mean you're a sorry loser, but you will lose out on the glory and promise of God if you don't receive his gift of eternal life. Would you bow your heads and pray with me? Just want to look around, and I'm looking. I don't see anyone looking. Every head is bowed. If you don't know for a fact that you've asked Christ to forgive you of your sins, you've told him, I believe in you. I want you to be my boss. Come into my life and live through me. If you don't know for a fact that you've done that and meant it, listen, you can pray that prayer dozens of times. You can be baptized in a local river till you know every fish by name, but until your name's written in his book of life, that's right, you don't know him yet. You'd say, I don't know that I know him. Just slip your hand up so I can see that. I don't know that I know him. Anyone? Slip it up. Amen.